So within Nuke, let's take a look at how to rebuild our beauty and gain more control over our render. So I'm going to File, Open, go to our project root, and jump into the Nuke directory and go to Chapter 3 Beauty Rebuild Part 1 Start. So within the scene, you'll notice that all of our read nodes are offline. If we jump into Edit, Project Settings, we can set our project directory, which will link everything up. So I'm just going to copy and paste our script name, and then remove the file name, remove that Nuke directory, and then remove that /. So we just get to the project root. And then everything will hook up automatically. We won't have to actually replace those read nodes manually. So with that said, let's make sure we have our LUT turned on. So we have IP for input process, and then take our sRGB LUT and switch that over to none. So say we want to gain more control over this image. We want to control our specularity. Maybe we want to boost this up or down, or give it maybe like a spec bloom, or take our wireframe out here that we have in our self-illumination paths, or do something like control our atmosphere that's in our image. To do this, we have to access our passes here. So if we click this guy up here, up in our left corner of our viewer, we have access to all of our passes. So we have lighting, reflection, everything that we were seeing in the V-Ray frame buffer is we have access to now within this read node. So to abstract these from the channels, if we jump into a shuffle node, so it's just I'm just hitting tab here and typing in shuffle. I'm going to hit enter and bring that in. So something I want to talk about really quick is the shuffle node. If we just attach this, and really quick, if I select a channel here, there's not a lot of viewport representation of what this is actually doing, right? So I put the set default knobs here, and what this will do is if we double click this and click that guy, what it's going to do is set some default values within our shuffle node, specifically this label here. And if we create another shuffle node, so tab shuffle, create that, you notice that our label here is set to the value in expression, which is referring to whatever we select here in our input. So with that said, I'm just going to delete those and start over. So I'll do tab shuffle, and then I'll select our lighting render element. And you notice that we can actually see that lighting render element selection there. And if we switch this over to something like reflect, it'll reflect right here in our node graph, which makes our multi-pass tree, when we get bigger and bigger and bigger, it makes it much, much more readable and much easier to work with. With that said, the shuffle node can be very, very unintuitive. This is one of the biggest places that I see like my students and just general people that I work with in production get stuck with, is they don't really know how this works. They're just kind of clicking around here, and they don't really know how, like, what is going into what. So we can break this down a little bit better. I have these two images over here, one being our shuffle node, two being a better description of what's going on. So one, we really don't really have to worry about all this stuff, specifically if we're just working with, hey, we just want to take our lighting pass and shuffle that out and do some stuff to it. We can just kind of look at it like this. So with that said, the way this works is the one channel is what channel we're selecting. So say we want to select the lighting pass. What we're doing by selecting it right here is shuffling that out into the RGBA. So the RGBA becomes our lighting pass, and we can actually visually start working with this. The way these channels are going, so you notice that we have red, green, blue, and alpha. That's the incoming channels. And if we come over here, this is the outgoing channel. So this is what we're shuffling into the RGBA. So red, green, blue, alpha. So by default, red, green, blue, alpha, red is going into red, green is going into green, blue, alpha. So by default, it's not really doing anything. If we take like the green channel and put it here, the green channel will now go into the red. Blue channel will now go into the red. Same thing down here with the green. If we select the red, that'll go into the green. If we select the red and the blue, that'll go into blue. So with that all dissected, the last two things is just these two solid objects here. If we select these, it'll shuffle black into the red, pure black. And then same thing with white. It'll shuffle pure white into the red. So if we jump back over here, double click that, and start playing around here, you notice that if we select red, it'll shuffle the red channel into all the channels, green into all the channels, and so on and so forth. And then if we do something like put white, it'll shuffle white into all the channels. So with that said, let's start rebuilding our beauty pass. So we have our lighting. I'm going to copy and paste that, hook that up, and then I'm going to select our GI pass. So we have our GI and our lighting. Let's combine these, and we're going to do that with a merge node. So I'm going to hit M to merge, and then hook those two guys up. And then the operation that we use is plus. So now we have our GI combined with our lighting. So which knob comes first, the GI or the lighting? In this specific case, because we're using plus, 1 plus 1 equals 2, 2 plus 1 equals 3, 1 plus 2 equals 3. It doesn't really matter which way you add this stuff up. As long as you're adding, you'll get to the end result. So with that said, let's keep going with this. We're going to copy and paste these two, paste them, hook that up, and then switch this over to reflect. Copy and paste this again, and hook that up. We'll select our specularity. So specular, copy and paste this. You notice if I have something selected like this and paste it, it'll automatically hook up there. So if I just select this and hit paste, it'll automatically hook up for us. So refraction, paste, self-illumination, paste that, and we'll get our subsurface scattering, and select that, and the last one that we'll grab is our atmosphere. So now if we view everything together, you'll notice that we're getting back to the beauty. And if we 1-2 this, you'll notice that we're getting a 1-for-1. But you notice that we're in the RGBA, right? If we hit A over the viewer, our alpha is changing as we go from merge 7 to read 3. It's changing, and that's going to be a problem, specifically if we run into situations like this, where if we have an image that actually isn't covering the full frame, where it actually the alpha becomes much, much more important. So let's talk about how to treat alphas within our beauty rebuild. So to start, what I'm going to do is unpremultiply this. And what I mean by unpremultiply is essentially get rid of this edge there. So if I do unpremult, tab unpremult, enter, we are going to unpremultiply the RGBA. And all that's doing is dividing our alpha by RGBA, which has given us this unpremultiplied image. Then essentially what we want to do is premultiply it right after that. So essentially we're not doing anything, right? But now what we can do is work in between this unpremult and premultiplication. So if I take this and hit Control-Shift-X to move that guy off that tree and put this at the very bottom of the chain, we are now working in between the unpremult and the premultiplication. But if you see what happens, if we go from our start to end, we're getting darker. And this kind of stuff I see a lot of people when they first start off with multipass compositing, they kind of get stuck with, and it's this big alpha problem. Essentially what's happening when we rebuild this beauty, as we go, we are getting rid of the alpha, and we're destructing the alpha by doing all these additions. And it becomes more and more problematic as we come down the tree. So what we want to do is skip all that. And how we do that is essentially store the original RGBA. So we're storing that alpha, and then we're going to shuffle it back out down here, so we can kind of skip all this mess that we're creating with our alpha operations. So with that said, how do we do that? How do we take this RGBA and store it so that we can reuse it later? If we drop in a shuffle node, what we can do is shuffle our RGBA into a new channel. So RGBA 1 into 2, but we don't have to use this RGBA default value. What we can do is select this and go down to new. So we see all of our other channels here, but we'll go down to new, and this might be a little chopped off for you. If I actually just move this up, you'd be able to see that. But there's a new option down there, so you hit new, and then we get our new layer option. And then here what I'm going to do is just do underscore start RGBA. The reason why I like to do underscores for this kind of stuff is because I like to separate our utility passes from our PUD passes. So you'll see in a couple lessons that when we start talking about utility passes, there's a nice visual representation to put an underscore there. So with that said, we don't have any channels yet. So right, we have our layer, but we don't have an actual channel. So if we hit RGBA preset, it'll fill in our channel operations. And if you're kind of wondering what's the difference between a layer and a channel is like this, RGBA, and our actual layers are our layers right here. So these are actually considered a layer in Nuke. Great, so we're storing our original RGBA. We're restoring to restore that later on. But if we send it through the unpremult, you notice if we come up here and hit start RGBA, what we want to do is actually unpremultiply all the channels. And that's going to help us out later on down the road when we start doing like map passes and stuff like that. A lot of times you'll see a lot of really bad edge issues. That helps prevent that. With that said, if we unpremultiply all the channels, we're affecting our start RGBA. Therefore, we can't use our alpha because we're unpremultiplying it right there. Right. So what we can do is drop in a copy node. So what the copy node is going to do for us is copy a specific layer from a different tree, specifically this A tree here. So if I hit period to drop in a dot, hook this up with our A, route that back to our start RGBA layer. What we can do is copy in our channel. So by default, it's copying our alpha channel. We don't want that. What we actually want to do is a layer copy. So we'll layer copy in our start RGBA. So what happens is if we go to start RGBA, we get access to our original RGBA channel. So the rest of these passes, if we check them out, like lighting, they will be unpremultiplied, which is what we want, but the actual start RGBA will be left untouched. With that said, I'm going to select these and hit tab to backdrop these. So that'll essentially be our unpremult. And then down here, we'll premult. So what we'll do is tab shuffle. And then we'll bring back our original alpha right here. So we'll grab start RGBA. So instead of grabbing something from one, we'll leave our RGBA the same. And then we'll go into our start RGBA within the second option. And we just want to take the alpha from that channel. So essentially, we're rebuilding our beauty. We're doing a bunch of cool stuff, but then at the very end, we're restoring that alpha. So without that, we get this, and with that alpha restore, we get our original alpha. And now if we do a premult, it's going to bring us back one for one to our original image. So I'm just going to backdrop that. So as long as we're working in between those two backdrops, we'll be good to go. So with that said, if I switch back over to our original tree, now we start to have much more control over our image. So if we want to do something like, hey, I don't want this wireframe, we can come into our self-illumination, and if I just select this and hit G to drop in a grade node, and then we just come in here and hit multiply, we can actually completely take that out. And we can start doing other things like come up to our specularity and say we want this to be more bloomed out. We come in here, select our specularity, hit G, and then we can just boost that up like that. So you notice that's actually getting a lot hotter. And if we do something like throw in a glow here, we get a nice specular bloom going. Last example I want to show you right here is, say we want to play with our atmosphere. Right now there's not a lot going here. It's kind of not much difference between the foreground and the background. Say we want a more contrast happening here. If we just select that, hit G for our grade node, what we can do is multiply up like that. And say if we do something really high, go up like that, and then just slam our gamma down like that, we'll start to get much more contrast. So I'm going to scroll up, and how I'm scrolling there, if you just select in between the 1 and the 7, and you scroll up on your mouse, you'll be able to dynamically go up and down. And then if we see what happening is we're actually modifying that atmosphere pass dramatically. Cool. So with that said, this is the simplest way to rebuild our image with just all of these additions. But say we want to do something like have greater control over this, like we actually want to have control over these colors here, or the actual color of our lights themselves. What we actually have to do is start diving into what we call the raw passes. And in the next lesson, we're going to talk about that.